It has been a whopping 18 years since Hulk Ultimate Destruction released, and despite how old that makes me feel, it warrants a look back at the game. Developed by Radical Entertainment and acting as a radical departure from the previous Hulk games, notably Hulk, released just 2 years prior and developed by the same team, the largest difference between the two is that Hulk Ultimate Destruction is open world, featuring 2 maps for the player to travel between, and there are no Bruce Banner missions, which seemed like a strange inclusion in the previous game. If you want, I could make a video all about Hulk, but for now, let's focus on Ultimate Destruction because, as the title will have you believe, it is the best Hulk game we have. Everything from its gameplay to its art style has aged remarkably well, and it continues to age well when each Hulk game past this point has been worse and worse. Because of that, Ultimate Destruction has garnered a cult following from fans who played it when they were younger, myself included. So it warrants a look back at the game to see if it really was that great, or if nostalgia has been clouding our vision. This is Hulk Ultimate Destruction 18 years later. A general caveat that I need to get out of the way is that while this game on consoles had its share of performance issues, I won't comment on any of them here because I had to emulate the game using Dolphin. I did play the game on Xbox when I was younger, but I didn't take notice of frame rates or resolution because I was 7 and didn't know any better. When looking at the rest of the presentation, I'd be confident in saying the game has aged rather gracefully. Its art style is distinct in that while it is grounded, it's not realistic per se. It takes liberties regarding its realism, such as making the Hulk a brighter green compared to the diarrhea color of the very next game, and with some of the moves Hulk can pull off being reminiscent of the WWE. It's rare that a game can feature surfing on a bus, pile-driving robots, and throwing tanks without any clashes. The animation work here for nearly every move is slick and well made, punches have impact, and the many superpower suplexes interact well with one another. There are some issues with hitboxes or animations seeming to lack their usual telegraphs, but for most of the ride you'll be consistently impressed by the different ways Hulk can move and interact with his environment. Looking at any of the behind the scenes footage for this game, you can see that there was endless passion going into this, as everything from fundamental mechanics to the subtle sounds of the city were given the utmost care. Just take a look at some of these insightful interviews. Hulk moves with a perfect blend of speed and weight, leaving craters with each step and radiating with gamma energy when exerting force. Radical did an excellent job of making the Hulk feel like a powerhouse, and his many roars and the trail of bodies and destroyed buildings left in his path made me grateful that the game never presents Hulk as a bona fide hero. The most interesting thing about the Hulk, to me, is that he has all the physical qualities of a supervillain. He has overwhelming strength, unbridled anger, and can't even speak, and yet the Hulk knows right from wrong most times. Ultimate Destruction poses the Hulk, like many stories do, as a naive creature, which can shift some of the responsibility when his destruction has unintended casualties. Furthering this is Banner's desire to cure himself of the Hulk. It allows the player to enjoy the destruction without constantly feeling a sense of dissonance. You could consider it lazy that the game doesn't call attention to this, but if the game considers casualties a free-roaming canon, then it would hinder the fun immensely, so no complaints on my end. But this doesn't change the fact that Hulk looks like a villain. People who know he's good are scared of him, so imagine how the people of New York feel after seeing him flatten a bus and after the military has been bringing out Tier 1 explosives to bring him down. When even peacefully roaming the streets, people will be screaming and running at the sight of you, and the barrage of sirens, speeding cars, and screams make even the smallest moments pure chaos, which feels appropriate for a beast like this. When you're in full-on combat, it is sensory overload. I plan to talk about the soundtrack, but truthfully, you can barely hear it above the sounds of missiles, guns, and bellowing beasts. It drowns out nearly every song, but that's okay because the sound design here is well done, from the bullets to the buildings collapsing under the Hulk's force. It's all well done and it allows the game to age so gracefully. A final note about presentation is that I love the way they structure the opening tutorial. In keeping with the narrative, the military is attempting to study the Hulk, which means the opening takes place within a VR simulation used to explain to recruits and subsequently the player how the Hulk moves. This is one of the ways the game maintains its grounded story, even if it can sometimes exit the realm of realism with the massive mechs and Hulk sneaking into a base by Flintstoning a truck. Yeah, it's dumb, like the many victory animations for Hulk that see him grabbing his sack or yawning, but again, it's fun so it gets a pass. While there are many great qualities to Ultimate Destruction, it will always be the gameplay that dominates any discussion of the game, and for good reason. Ultimate Destruction has an interesting task in front of itself, and it's something other games with uber powerful characters have struggled with, and that's how do you realistically challenge a character that is borderline indestructible and strong enough to kill a Weasley soldier with but a flick? Radical's answer was overwhelming weaponry. You won't often see regular soldiers coming to stop you, but mechs, tanks, helicopters, fighter jets, missile launchers, and more, often at the same time. One-on-one fights with Hulk are rarely a challenge, but when you have 20 different enemies to keep track of, that's when the challenge arises. Furthermore, when we give Hulk a pseudo health bar, like a building or a person that needs to be protected, we can inflict reasonable limitations that challenge the player without diminishing the power fantasy. Having the challenges be numbers-based means we can also give Hulk a plethora of abilities, and when certain enemies carry weaknesses easily exploited by those abilities, we get gameplay that can be both challenging and varied at the same time. Let's use one move as an example, and it's my favorite ability in the game, the elbow drop. It is simply visceral to drop down on someone with all this force, and look at these health bars. This is a boss fight, you seeing this? But finding the context to use this move restricts us. We can only use it when next to a climbable surface and when the enemy is roughly underneath us and stationary. These requisites mean we cannot use them on mobile enemies like the Hulkbusters. Now let's reverse it. You have Hulkbusters which are mobile but small enough to be picked up, which creates opportunity for you to not only grab them for a chance to isolate them from their pack, but for you to get damage in and pick them off, throw them at another enemy, and the list goes on. If there are tanks, helicopters, destroyers, and Hulkbusters, and because all these moves look equally cool, utilizing air attacks, grabs, elbow drops, and even more depending on what environmental tools are nearby, are viable. Maybe you take the brute force approach and use a car as steel fists, or maybe you take out a launcher nearby and use the military's missiles against them, or maybe you deal AoE damage with a thunderclap. The list goes on. Restrictions in this case prevent complacency and encourage experimentation, which is where you'll get the most out of this combat. Moves combo into each other and you can air attack a helicopter, eventually cannonballing towards it, then follow it up with grabbing the vehicle in midair and punching it down. Approach a mech with an uppercut, so while they're in the air you can charge a right hook so they are instantly pummeled when they land. But this is not all, as there's a constant stream of missiles and bullets coming your way. So combat is a consistent stream of continuous movement, finding a pocket and dealing damage. But with such heavy artillery around every corner, you're bound to be hit, and while the Hulk is strong, he's not indestructible. When you reach either critical mass or an adrenaline surge, you'll find that you can sacrifice a power surge bar to perform a critical strike. These attacks are devastating and have a large windup and are such a perfect way to reset an encounter or downright skip it on easier difficulties. You gain a power surge bar by either losing all your health or by exceeding it. This is the perfect way to implement this system because the struggling player gets an extra chance to make a comeback by the skin of their teeth, and the skilled player can use their extra bars to speed up a fight with considerable style, or stockpile it and use it as extra health. In both cases, there is risk involved because your attacks can be interrupted, and at times you simply get comboed so hard you won't get the chance to make a comeback. While you might have plenty of tools up your big green sleeves, your enemies have some too, often replicating your own. The mechs will be capable of foot stomping you, grabbing you, and punching hard enough to send you crashing into the floor. If I had to offer criticism here, it's that in a game like this where it feels so good to constantly engage with movement and combat, having enemies that can frequently halt you and force you to virtually pause the game for a few seconds becomes especially frustrating. What furthers the annoyance is that when these enemies grab the Hulk, at times his size if not arguably smaller, Hulk will just sit there limp. And not only narratively does it not make sense for the Hulk of all characters to not resist, in gameplay it feels extra punishing. And when the grabs from these enemies come out this fast, it's a tad annoying. And you know what? I can excuse it. Shitty hitboxes on some attacks, enemies grabbing you instantly and virtually taking the controller away, I can handle it. But the motherfucking missiles ruin any challenge in this game. During one of your first forays into the Badlands, a turret that fires missiles will be introduced, and as the game progresses, they become more common. These fire two kinds of missiles. Smaller salvos will hit you rapidly, doing damage, and those are fine. But then there are those that are larger, and these will not only track you so well that you need near perfect timing to dodge them, but when they hit, and they will, you will be stunned on both ground and air. And where this becomes a real big issue is when you need to carry something back to the church, which anyone who played the game will know is a very common objective. This means that if you're carrying something, you cannot attack, and when you're hit in the air by these, you'll drop the item. Now I see you getting ready to type your comments saying, Aqua, you could just destroy the missiles and grab the item after. Well, I have bad news for you, my friend. They respawn. By the end of the game, the enemies will respawn the moment you take them out, and I understand the reason. You want consistent enemies respawning because you want to continue the thrill of the chase. And strategy be damned. If you take out all the enemies before stealing an object, there is no chase. There is no adrenaline. But these things are downright horrible and a damn near fatal flaw. I'm glad some reviews for this game have mentioned how strange the difficulty is, because in the last 2 chapters it ramps up like crazy, and yet there are so many reviews that didn't mention it. I need to be clear, the problem is not that these missiles do too much damage. They don't. It's not that it stuns you. It's annoying, but I can get over that. It's that there is a 99% chance that these things will hit you because they track you so well. And if they miss, there's a good chance the same missile will turn around and try again. But here's a silver lining. If you turn the difficulty down to easy, it seems to track you far less. Now this leads into another problem. When you play on easy, there's no challenge whatsoever. It is incredibly easy to beat the game, and look, that's fine. That's the point of easy mode, but I hate that I have to take a trade-off. Either it's brain dead easy or it's brain aneurysm inducing hard. Look, I know I'm making a mountain of a molehill here, but I had to deal with this shit for 3 playthroughs, and eventually I felt like I was gonna pop a fucking blood vessel. And don't even get me started on the Hulk being grabbed over and over again in some missions. What? That felt good, you know? You get that all out? Anywho, presenting hard mode after you complete the game just takes some Hulk-sized balls, and while hard is hard, I think in a game like this it is justifiable to play on easy. It fulfills the power fantasy of being an unstoppable Hulk, and for that I'd say it's at least worth trying. While we're focused on combat, I also feel that the city, while being a bit indistinct, is a more enjoyable arena to fight enemies. There's a good mix of open areas and tight alleys that allow for more strategizing in terms of where fights take place and how to approach them. In the Badlands, a lot of it is open, which means natural cover is severely limited, and while that can be a valid challenge, I like having more means of expressing myself. It was fun to run into the open, grab an enemy, and then take them behind a building for an isolated beatdown, even if that kind of strategizing is above the Hulk. Ultimately, movement is what ties all the gameplay qualities together, and while controlling the Hulk takes some getting used to and movement doesn't feel great until you get the air dashes, once you're set up, God, is it a joy to just bound from rooftop to rooftop in pursuit of something. Jumping from the side of a wall to a roof and back, it's great. The reason you won't have all these abilities immediately is because of the progression, which is unique and well done. I know some have taken issue with the Smash Point system, but I'd argue it was a smart move. After each thing you destroy, objective you complete, and chapter you finish, you get Smash Points, which can be spent on new abilities. The fundamental skills are cheap, and as you progress they get more and more expensive and their utility greater. I enjoyed being able to choose my rewards because it meant every time I got a new move, it was one that I wanted, and thus every upgrade was meaningful. I'll admit, some of the moves like the running grab feel essential enough that they should have been part of the default moveset, but you get this move so early that I find myself feeling it's a moot point. I also appreciated the sparse stat upgrades. Sometimes I'll look at a skill tree in a game and see half of them are simply ammo increases, health increases, and so on, but not here. I've mentioned before that one-on-one encounters with the Hulk typically don't go well for his opponent, which is why the gameplay largely sees overwhelming numbers, but there are plenty of boss fights here that are quite well done. Each encounter has a trick to it, whether that's a weakness, a strategy, or a time limit, and it makes them both memorable and challenging. The first fight against Abomination is a minor exception, but only because it's early, and it satisfies the Hulk fantasy of 2 big green giants clashing. Even here though, you can cause debris to fall on Abomination, which will deal extra damage. You'll have a few fights against a series of Hulkbusters, and those are all solid, especially the first destroyer, which has satellites that can be used to summon reinforcements, meaning you have to take them out while fighting the large mech. For all of these Hulkbusters, your goal is to keep moving and throwing things at them, which can be admittedly repetitive, especially against Ross, as it sees you just throwing tanks because the arena is barren with nothing else to use. The fight against Mercy is an interesting twist because instead of having power, she has speed, meaning that in order to get some damage in, you need to keep up with her and get quick hits in. It would also be wrong to call Mercy weak, because she was the only character to flat out one-shot me in her second phase, so don't let her small size fool you. You should also not let the Devil Hulk's large stature fool you either, because despite being the most intimidating of the enemies, he's a pushover. He'll continue to spawn crystals that must be destroyed in order to draw him out, and when you do, you'll notice that when you break the stone pillars he raises, you can throw a piece of the rock at him, which will do some solid damage. I don't intend to criticize any of these fights for any repetition, because despite having played this game countless times and even 3 times recently for this video, I never got bored of the spectacle, which is a grand achievement. While all of these fights were fun, they weren't too challenging. That is, except for Abomination. Your final encounter is at the dam, and you need to not only take down a foe that is stronger, faster, and bigger than you need to do so before he takes out 4 generators holding the dam together. There are a few glaring issues with this fight, notably when Abomination is not facing you, he can still hit you, and he can also turn around to grab you extremely quick. And when he throws a generator, the explosion is enough to demolish you, but he takes no damage at all. Regardless of those, you need to not only dodge the fighter jets, but keep track of what environmental tools are available, because simply punching the Abomination won't get the job done, and with his increased size, he overpowers and outreaches you. I found that using a pole as a ranged weapon was good for getting in high damage at a distance, but this won't stop him from using his own attacks against you. His ground pound can hit you and combo you from a massive distance. You'll need to be fast, efficient, and smart to win this fight, and I love it because it borders perfectly on too hard. I had nearly 4 fights in a row where I was so damn close to winning but barely came up short, and that kind of loss results in an intoxicating amount of determination. The fight is significantly easier once you realize you can hit Abomination into the generator generators, but even that could only be done a few times as it causes one of the 4 to be destroyed. I'll admit that the difficulty spike near the end of the game is brutal, but that aside, I love this fight. The level design generally of the campaign is fine. In a game like this, all you need to do is give an excuse to smash, and the excuses here are good. You'll often find yourself having to destroy something or grab something, both of which offer plenty of room for you to flex your skills. I enjoyed that most of the missions take place in the open world because the camera can sometimes get stuck in the smaller environments, but the camera didn't get in the way much outside. While most of the missions here are grounded to an extent, I found it hysterical that in one mission the Hulk decides it's a good idea to use stealth and disguise himself as a truck, and it is exactly as goofy as it sounds. Outside the campaign, you'll find plenty of minigame-esque challenges that reward smash points and interesting contexts to use your powers. Races are here as they should be, but there are also challenges like traveling a certain distance without touching the floor that test your traversal in different ways. Some are goofier, like the one where using a metal bar you have to hit a falling enemy like it's a baseball as far as you can, and these are generally hit or miss for me. A challenge where I have to stack cars on a roof isn't exactly peak Hulk, but having an objective like cause as much destruction as possible definitely is. I know many didn't get much mileage out of these, and truthfully when I come back to this game I often don't replay them, but I still appreciate their inclusion. They're indicative of a team that prioritized fun above all else, and this extends to the post-game rewards. Once beating the game, you can not only enter a new game plus, but use some interesting unlockables. The first of note is playing as Abomination, which is great, but my favorite is Savage Banner, which costs 1,000,000 smash points and is exactly how it sounds. It may be implied that a skin like this would cause plenty of issues given the size, but a lot of animations have actually been resized to fit the proportions, and for a skin change that most won't get until halfway through their second playthrough, I gotta commend it. It was on this New Game Plus playthrough that I found myself realizing that this game has that X factor that makes it endlessly replayable. I wish I could put my finger on it, and it's kind of my job, so I'm sweating a bit here, but really, some games just have something about them that makes them replayable to no end, whether that's the passion, the fun, the deep systems, maybe a mix of everything. It made me reflect on current gaming. I won't pretend to know much about the 2005 gaming market, I was regrettably 5 years old, but I find that time is valuable, and gamers these days are forced to consider playtime when purchasing a game because $90 is steep. But something a lot of these older games did to extend the playtime is create deep systems and teach the player to be intrinsically motivated. The gameplay of Ultimate Destruction features restrictions I talked about earlier not to limit the player's ability to express themselves, but to force them to try other options. I'm one of those gamers that if I discover a winning strategy, I won't experiment. I won't ever stop unless I get bored, so having a game heavily encourage me to try new tactics puts me in a mindset where I think about my moves not in a vacuum, but instead imagine how they can be used in tandem, how they might affect certain enemies. This is where the replay value lies. Even into my third playthrough, I was experimenting, and I found satisfaction in trying to take down an enemy in a way I hadn't before. And games with systems that allow this feel few and far between in our current day. Somewhere along the way, developers and gamers stopped caring about what you can do in a game and more about what objective you must complete. It became less about systems that through sheer depth alone demanded your time and more about a series of boxes to tick. When a new game comes out like Assassin's Creed Mirage or Spider-Man 2, people complain that they're too short, and aside from 20 hours to me being plenty of time, because we've stopped enticing replayability, people truly see that 20 hours as all games have to offer. It's not a game anymore, it's content, and that fucking sucks. And look, I'm not trying to hate on the modern industry, and there are plenty of great games coming out, and this is generally referring to the AAA market. And I'm too young to be saying bullshit like, they don't make them like they used to, but fuck man, they don't. Ultimate Destruction's gameplay is just one of many examples where a short but deep game can offer more playtime than a sprawling open world with endless quests. Sorry, I didn't mean to get so off topic, and again, this is not me saying that modern gaming is dead. Hell, modern gaming is in many ways better than ever, but that doesn't come without a few grievances too. So, while the gameplay and presentation of this game is pretty solid, I can't necessarily say the same about the story. I think it does a good enough job of creating excuses for some great set pieces, but I also think it's nothing you'll remember a week after playing. The story follows Bruce Banner attempting to cure himself of the Hulk while the military and Emil Blonsky are on his tail. During the opening, Blonsky gets infected with the same gamma radiation that turned Bruce into the Hulk, turning him into an abomination. Throughout most of the story, Blonsky has a huge obsession with Bruce and his research, but it isn't explained at first. Problems keep stacking up for Bruce, unfortunately, because inside him is a Devil Hulk that is deteriorating Bruce's mind. A quick side tangent about the Devil Hulk, he has a long history in the comics, but that context isn't really necessary here. I mean, you just gotta know the basics for the story as a whole, you know, big green guy gets pissed off, yada yada. But essentially, Devil Hulk is an alternative personality created by Banner when he was a child due to his father abusing him. Devil Hulk acted as a twisted idea of a father figure to protect him in his mind. And in the context of the game, however, Devil Hulk is presented as a force that attempts to crumble Bruce's mind so that the Devil Hulk can take over and effectively possess Bruce's body. The big distinction between the Hulk and the Devil Hulk is that Hulk to some extent knows right from wrong and isn't a bad guy, but rather a really angry guy, and his destruction is equated to a magnitude 8 temper tantrum. Devil Hulk is pure evil. Through the help of his friend Len, Bruce is able to, throughout the game, steal parts needed for a machine to confront the Devil Hulk and stop his mind from breaking. Along the way, we fight Abomination, Mercy, and do a lot of smashing through an implant that allows Len to feed us objectives. For context, it sounds something like this. Retreat. As we continue onwards, our objectives go from stealing to destroying, and the commands begin sounding different. Destroy. This is the Devil Hulk's influence, and it causes us to begin destroying public buildings with innocent civilians in them, and this causes Len to turn us over to the military, realizing that the Hulk is out of control. All while this is happening, Blonsky is having his own breakdown, and the Abomination within him is making him lose his mind. Something to note here is a gap in my understanding. Abomination changes throughout the game. At first he's about the same size as Hulk, but by the end he towers over him, and his features are more exaggerated, with goblin-like ears, glowing eyes, and scales. Someone else with glowing eyes, scales, and a large stature is Devil Hulk. So I assume that this Abomination, the one we see in Blonsky's mind, is like his own Devil Hulk, and I'm not sure if that's what the game intends to imply, but that's my best guess. Most of the other characters are plainly explained, and with the completion of each chapter you unlock Blonsky files which will offer a bit more background on some of the characters. I'd be lying if I said any of the information provided wasn't either obvious or implied already, but hearing Bruce and Len's comments were entertaining enough, I guess. Bruce wakes up in the military facility, and it's clear that they intend to torture and pick him apart, to no one's surprise. Thankfully, we escape, and after Len and Bruce make amends, they confront the Devil Hulk. After an intense boss fight, Hulk in a respectable articulation explains that Hulk is the strongest one there is. I'm sure that there's plenty to read into here, and I could try to explain that this is Bruce's way of confronting his past, his anger, and his sinister thoughts, but the game glosses over this pretty hard, so I won't bother. Now that the devil within is defeated, there's only one thing left to stop, and that's Blonsky, who intends to break the local dam, causing the city to be flooded. By the way, I know I keep referring to it as the city, and that's because I don't know if they ever mention what the city is called, so yeah. While attempting to track Blonsky down, we see that the reason he's so obsessed with Banner is that his wife has actually suffered some kind of gamma radiation poisoning, and he blames Bruce for it, but also hopes his research might find a way to save his wife Nadia. I think this is a solid motivation for Blonsky, and it makes him a sympathetic villain, or would have had we not learned this so late into the game. If we had known about this earlier, there's a greater chance we could excuse his obsessive nature, but at this point, Blonsky's endangered so many people that this reveal isn't enough to save him from being a flat-out bad guy. It also doesn't help that had he explained this to Bruce from the start, instead of building him up as a villain in his mind, he could have avoided all of this. Hulk and Abomination face off one final time, and yet Blonsky is still able to break the dam. He explains that Hulk will be blamed for this event, and he's right, but Hulk is able to create a new dam by destroying a canyon, leading to an ending where the hero is still seen as the villain, and Bruce has more or less come to terms with his anger. The story overall is just fine. It feels like a comic book story, which is in no doubt thanks to the contributions of Paul Jenkins, but I'd be lying if I said it was that memorable. Thankfully, there's nothing that stand out bad about it. Performances are great, cutscenes are generally good, though I felt like some of them were mixed weirdly, and I didn't feel like there was any filler along the way. The characterization of Banner and the Hulk are presented well enough, but I'd be lying if I said there was much to chew on here. When I first came back to Ultimate Destruction for this video, I was worried. There are a ton of games I come back to from my childhood and realize that they weren't that good, but Ultimate Destruction is a lovely exception to that. Its presentation, especially the sound design, has aged surprisingly well, and its gameplay is damn near evergreen. If you've never played this game, then I'd highly recommend it, and even if you have, I recommend playing it again if it's been a while. It's a shame that Radical wasn't brought back for the next Hulk game. The silver lining is prototype, but after such a good Hulk game, you'd think they'd want to strike while the iron's hot. Instead, the next Hulk game was this, and oh boy, isn't that a game. But maybe that's for the next video. For now, thank you so much for watching, and let me know your experience with Ultimate Destruction, and if you'd like to see a video on 2003's Hulk or 2008's The Incredible Hulk. Thank you to the channel members and patrons for supporting these videos, and if you want more from me, then you can subscribe and of course follow me on other social medias in the description. Thanks again, and take care guys.